So, Manfred Mann and You Angel You, the man who is actually drumming on that is one of our guests. Well, he's our guest, our superstar guest this afternoon, Geoff Britton. We've been so excited and very glad to have you with us.
I'm honoured to be here.
It's a pleasure and a privilege.
I tell you what, though, we never stop talking, and you know you've been popping backwards and forwards and sorting out some different things with Bay over the past couple of weeks. But basically, every time you're here, nobody gets any work done because you're just telling us about the various things that have happened in the life and times of a rock drummer. And actually, you were on that, weren't you? Angel Station album from Manfred Mann's Earth Band.
Yes.
Although you were just checking because you were like, "Is this me on this, or is it who else was?"
You actually said to me, "You said, Rosie, who's the drummer on this?" And I went, "Who is the drummer on this?" And Geoff went, "Who's the drummer on this, Geoff?" And you went, "Oh, it's actually me." Do you forget who you've worked with over the years, Geoff?
Well...
Do you forget exactly what you've done?
You forget. Don't about forget, but you're not sure what versions brought out. Sometimes people bring out a re-release, and normally I know when it's me by listening, but because we were talking about Chris Slade, the drummer who was previously with Manfred, I was just thinking, oh, that must be Chris Slade, and well, it wasn't. It was GB.
GB.
Right, let's start at the beginning, can we? Right at the beginning, and you were your main profession wasn't really as a drummer, was it, to start with?
Well, I was actually expected to take over my father's business. He was a tailor and he had shops in South East London, and that was the plan. Unfortunately, I saw Gene Krupa playing with Benny Goodman on our black and white TV, and I'm afraid my fate was sealed.
So what did a young person in Lewisham do then to become part of the rock scene at that time? Must have been quite buzzing though, really, I suppose.
Well, really, London through that period was the place. If I look at it from a sort of historic point of view, the rock and roll that came from America wasn't eclipsed by the Brits. We had a good go at it, but the Americans had the edge. Now then, when we got into what I call our pop and our rock bands, apart from one or two, the Americans didn't quite catch it, and it's kind of like that in reverse. And I was of that generation that came through the early 60s. I mean, I saw the Beatles live in those days, and everybody really. And London was kind of like a magnet for all that energy and all that creativity.
Were you listening to predominantly American music then, as you were starting to grow and learn as a musician yourself?
Well, my dad was a big fan of Louis Armstrong, and my brother, who's 5 years older than me, it was Frank Sinatra with him, Frankie Lane, and so it morphed out of that. But once I was listening to that because that was the family music on the record, with 78 records. But once Bill Haley and Elvis and Lonnie Donegan had opened the page, then there was no turning back. That was it.
So, who were you working with, say, when you just first started out?
Well, I was very fortunate in one sense. When I say fortunate, because when it came to the audition with Wings, it wasn't, there were, you know, Mitch Mitchell was on the day that I played. Mitch Mitchell was Jimi Hendrix drummer, and he was a game changer along with a few others of that great creative time that England had in terms of our pop groups. So he came on to play, and other guys who were great, but not great all-rounders. And I'd worked quite extensively for the Club Mediterranee, which is a big holiday organisation throughout Europe in their hotels and their holiday camps. And doing that, I learned to play everything from pasodobles, cha-chas, and when everyone had gone to bed, then we could work as a jazz group and play our own sort of stuff and have a bit of fun with the late night revelers. So I kind of had a musical baptism in everything. I was very fortunate, and I kind of have the attitude still. There's only two kinds of music, and that's good or bad. And so everything that comes under the category of good, I like to listen to.
Geoff, tell us the story of the actual audition for Wings, because it's a fantastic story. It was 150 guys, and how did you find out about the audition? Because like we was chatting yesterday, me and Geoff were chatting for ages, weren't we? We hadn't planned to, but that's how it happens. But there was no phones, there was no mobiles or internet or email.
No, okay, it's a bit of a palaver story, but
I like it though. I like a palaver, Geoff.
basically it was in the Melody Maker that Denny Sywell had been the American drummer with Wings, and he'd gone back to America. And so the management put an advert in Melody Maker. Melody Maker was the Bible, the encyclopedia. It advertised everybody, and it covered everything. So it advertised that McCartney was looking for a drummer, and I was standing in for a friend of mine running his dojo, his martial arts club in West Wickham, Kent, because he'd gone to Okinawa to study for a couple of years, and one of the students was the manager of Fleetwood Mac, and in the break he said to me, "Are you going for the Wings audition?" And I said, "No, like you said, there was no internet, and McCartney Productions was ex-directory. So Cliff Davis, his name, and he's the guy who did the 1-2 on the stretch record we were talking about previously. So he said, "Stay in tomorrow morning and I'll call you through the number," which he did. And I then phoned up the Wings management, who then told me that the list was closed and that they had hundreds and hundreds of applications, which they'd actually brought down to 50, 52 or 4. And I don't know how it happened, but he just kept talking, and he just said, "Do you know, I'm going to put you on the list," and which he did. And then a few days later I got a phone call saying would I be free to come up to the Aubrey Theatre in St Martin's Lane in London's West End, and they'd be holding auditions. So I willingly accepted. I was given the 2 o'clock slot. So on the way into town, I was then living in Walderslade, Kent, and so I jumped on my motorbike and I stopped in Lewisham to pick up Jim Russell, who had a hit record at the time with Stretch, with "Why Did You Do It?" And he was hot. So I said, "Jump on the back, we're going up to audition with McCartney."
Sorry, you told another drummer that you were going for
Yeah.
Paul McCartney audition?
Yeah.
Come on, I would have thought most musicians would just have, kept it to themselves. That's quite magnanimous of you. Did you help each other out always like that?
Yeah, he's one of my dearest, closest friends. I did get him started in the business in that sense when he saw my drum kit, because we lived on the same block in those days. And, well, I didn't really think in terms that I was going to get the gig. It was just kind of a crack, meet Macca.
You would, wouldn't you? You'd grab your best mate to come meet Macca, definitely.
Not if he was going for the same drumming audition.
Well, yeah,
friend of mine, Kal.
It was just energy.
Yeah.
But anyway, we turned up at the theatre and we could park the motorbike right by the stage door, and we walked in, and there was a bit of a hoo-ha because Jim Russell wasn't on the list and he wasn't allowed to play. And I was kind of throwing my toys out the pram and saying, "Well, if he can't play, I won't play," which was
Hang on, the best audition of your life.
Really bullshit. And at that stage, I realised something wasn't quite the normal, because I had a view to the stage and I could see that there was nobody from Wings or Macca on stage. There was Rob Townsend playing, he's a great drummer. And so I asked the people who organised it, I said, "Well, what's the story?" And they said, "Well, you get to play with these guys, do about 6 or 7 tunes, and Macca and the management are in the theatre watching you." So I said, "That's okay, I'll play 3 tunes and Jim Russell will play the other 3. No, that wouldn't fly. And there was this real impasse because I stuck my neck out. I had my mate with me, and they were telling me it was a no-go. Anyway, the phone went, and the guy at 5:30 was cancelling. So Jim Russell got 5:30 slot.
Who cancels on Paul McCartney?
Yeah, he was hoping to reschedule this. He had some genuine family thing and he couldn't make it. So would he have another day? Well, I got my 2 o'clock spot, which was fortunate because they stopped for lunch. So they all buzzed off to the pub. And then Jim Russell and I got in on those drums and really got them where we were comfortable and tuned them up the way we liked them. Because I was the first drummer back on after lunch at 2 o'clock. Now, because Jim Russell was on much later and I was there, we were allowed to sit in the theatre, which nobody else had the choice. That's how I saw Mitch Mitchell come onto the stage.
What did you say when he walked on,
yeah,
you and your mate?
Well, Jim Russell and I were really big fans of Mitch Mitchell. As I say, he was a genuine 60s game changer, along with Ginger Baker and a lot of great guys that I truly love and respect. So anyway, when Mitch walks on, Jim Russell and I sit there, and both of us, unprepared or unplanned, we both said in unison, oh no, not Mitch Mitchell, because as far as we were concerned, the gig was over. I mean, he shouldn't even been auditioning. He just had a bad day. So that's the story, and then it goes from there. There was a space in time. I get a phone call. Would you be prepared to come into the Camden, a theatre in Camden Town? And now you'd meet Paul and you play with the guys. So I got a morning or an afternoon of that, and then nobody gives anything away. Just you play a few songs and you tour and you play a few more songs, and then a few more days go by, and I got another phone call. Would I come in and spend all day with the band and go out to have lunch and what have you? And which I did. And I had a mate with me on all those times, helping me use my drums and just you know, have your mates with you, moral support as it were. And then a few more days passed, and in actual fact I was out jogging. I lived opposite a big field, and I was out jogging, and my then ex-wife opened the window and shouted that Paul McCartney was on the phone himself and telling me I got the gig.
What did Paul McCartney ask you to play in an audition? He was a big. He asked you to play rock and roll, didn't he? What was that? What did he ask you? That's
okay,
really funny.
okay, yes, well done. Okay, so the very first playing with Macca, with Paul, he says to me, "Do you like rock and roll?" So I said, "Come on, Paul, we're both the same age." I said, "We grew up on rock and roll." So he said, "Do you like it?" I said, "Of course I do, I love it." So he said, "Do you know Lucille?" So I said, "Well, yeah." I said, "Are you going to do the Little Richard version or the Everleys? Because dramistically they're very different." So he goes, "Ooh," and he's sort of appreciative little nod in my direction. And we ended up doing the Everleys version, where the drumming is Buddy Harman, a great drummer of that era, did all the Everleys hits. And yeah, we started off with that, and yeah, we went through a lot of Buddy Holly songs because Paul owns the songbook, and it all morphed into some of the Beatles stuff, some Wings stuff. You're just an audition, you know. What do you fancy playing? I fancy this. Someone starts a riff, you all just join in.
Yes, at that point you're just jamming with Paul McCartney.
Very loose. Yeah,
what an experience.
I've got to be honest
yeah.
that I was sitting behind him and looking at him, and then thinking, I can remember with my mates at the Woolwich Odeon watching the Beatles do a gig, and from that point on it just went ballistic. There'd been nothing like that or really since in music history of any group getting that big and that popular. And I'm sitting there behind him just playing with him, and it was just like funny how music's such an equalizer, because when you're all jamming along, you're all musicians having a blow, and yeah, quite interesting. But I did look at him and think, my God, that's the man.
That's Paul McCartney there. Do you know what I mean? That's just my arms would freeze. Do you know what I mean?
Well,
like,
I was asking
what
Geoff,
do you
I was
do?
like, were you nervous? And you've got a certain way of preparing for auditions. I mean, the biggest audition of your life, effectively, isn't it?
Yeah, that's very true. And in actual fact, Mickey Waller, who was the Faces, well, really Rod Stewart, he did all the solo stuff with Rod Stewart, and he was a real in-demand session guy, and a great drummer as I have, as great player. Well, he turned up, you see, a little bit nervous, and he'd had too much to drink, and so I think nerves on something of that calibre can play a game. So I did what Billie Jean King, the tennis player, did. I visualised the whole thing, sitting there talking and feeling nervous, and then relaxing my stomach, going through it again. So on the day, and having a really dear friend with me, my mate Bevo, accompanied me. We were just natural and having a laugh, and nerves didn't come into it. It really didn't. Yeah, it was very special.
You put a list of songs together for us, and things that you've played on, things that you've loved down the years. But we've actually got you playing in rehearsal, doing Jet.
So told me, I'd like to hear it.
And you haven't,
awesome.
and you haven't actually heard it ahead of us playing it now. If you're okay for us to play it, it's on the internet anyway.
I'd love to.
Is that all right?
Thank you. Yes.
Our guest this afternoon, Geoff Britton, in Rehearsal with Paul McCartney and Wings on Jet.